Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I step off the train and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good evening, listeners. It is Friday evening, January 14th. The weather is chilly. It's actually snowing a little bit. It's cooler than it's been the last couple days, and I maybe wish I had a slightly warmer jacket on. All that aside, I'm still very excited to be heading home as I do this episode for you because it's the second to last episode of the season in which I share with you my top 50 games of all time, at least as updated to reflect my current taste. So this is episode in which I'm going to talk about numbers 10 through 6. That's right, 5 games, so I get a little bit more longer to talk about each one. And as with the others, I'm going to take the opportunity to give you a little bit about why I like the game and focus on one thing about the game that really makes it stand out. That's my plan, and I'm sticking to it. So, join me, won't you? On for number 10, my 10th favorite game of all time. Oh, another thing. When I post the show notes for these two episodes, the last two where I'm doing my top 10 games, I am going to post in the show notes on rattleboxgames.com a link to the tag for every episode of the podcast in which I talk about each of these games. So if you would like to know more about any particular game, you'll be able to see which other episodes you should listen to find out more. Without further ado, my number 10. It was in my number 4 spot in 2015, my number 23 spot in 2017, my number 35 spot in 2019, and back up to number 10, it's the Uwe Rosenberg masterpiece, Agricola. Agricola is one of the first heavy games I played when I sort of dove into the hobby hard and was listening to podcasts and listening to people talk about things. Agricola kept coming up as this amazing game. I got it, and it just blew my mind. Here's what I like about Agricola. It is like you are like a horologist. A horologist is a person who works on a clock. When you play Agricola, you are fine-tuning a clock with the goal of maximizing your points in a very tight point spread. You have to get rooms built, you have to get children into those rooms, you have to get enough clay and stone to upgrade those rooms into different textures. You have to get enough food to feed all those people for all those things that you're doing. You need to get improvements so that you can bake bread and cook animals. And the game, in some ways, it's a little bit like a game of chess in that the board is the same every time. I mean, it's not the same every time. It gets randomized, but, it's all the same basic set of things. But unlike chess, you get the cards. And so, clearly the most interesting and exciting thing about Agricola is the cards. My favorite thing about it is this tightrope precision that you need to walk to manage feeding your family and doing all of these things. But the cards are what make each game of Agricola interesting, because when you've played a while, like I tend to play this game most on Boîte à Jeux, although I've been playing it on Board Game Arena. I like the Board Game Arena implementation of it pretty well, and I've enjoyed my plays, maybe 3 or 4 plays of it so far on Board Game Arena. But I've also got a running game. I think I'm on game 27 with my friend Kevin Berendt on Boîte à Jeux. And we play one game, and when we get to about around 13, then we also start a next game, and we kind of draft the cards while we're finishing up the last game. Then we start the next game, and we just have a constant game going. It's great. What makes Agricola so special is those cards. You have 14 cards at the beginning of 18 cards at the beginning of the game. You get 9 occupations, and you get 9 improvements. And each of these tweaks what's happening in your little medieval farm a little bit. And you take one occupation and one improvement, and then you pass the hand of cards to the next player, and they pass you their hand of cards, and you take one of each, one occupation, one improvement, and you go until you have 14 cards, 7 of each. And then you start the game. And you might, depending on the game, you might play half of those, you might play a third of those. You could play the game and not play any, although I wouldn't recommend it. But the occupations give you a direction to lean into. The improvements give you slight bonuses in different places if you're careful about it. Sometimes you can get them to stack, and it makes for this really nice precision puzzle that you have to solve in order to make your little housing estate succeed. And it's really easy to screw up. So I have plenty of games where I've only gotten, 15, 20 points, maybe less, because I screwed up in a round and I just ran out of food. Usually I'm not paying attention and suddenly I need 5 food and I don't have any. So I take 15 points of penalty. But in games where it works well, if you can get above 50 points, boy, you really have something special there. And that's why Uwe Rosenberg's Agricola is my number 10. If I take that long to talk about each of these top 10, I'm not going to finish by the time I get home. So I need to go faster, which leads me to my number 9, Altiplano. Now, this was on my list in 2019 at position 24, and it's moved up to position 9. Altiplano is another bag building game from Rainer Stockhausen. You'll remember that Orleans was also on my list. What I like about Altiplano is the theme. Altiplano is about raising crops and trading goods on the steppes of the Andes, and the different elements of the culture that are there show up in the different tokens. The process by which you trade your goods and you increase your engine are all really interesting. The storing away goods for points mechanism is a nice little brain burner. And if you have the Traveler expansion, which I do, it adds just another little taste of difference that makes for a little bit of a special experience. Like I said, I like the theme better, and I think the game is the game relies less on those tracks. That's not my favorite thing. In Orleans, you do have the tracks that you're moving up as you're getting different goods, and you get bonuses that way, and so you're kind of keeping track of those tracks. Altiplano doesn't do that. It also solves the problem of buying a token and never getting to use it by whenever you use a token in Altiplano, you put it in your little basket instead of putting it back in your bag. You don't put tokens back in your bag until it's empty. From that perspective, Altiplano is, I think, the better game. The one thing I like about it most is like I said, the theme. I really enjoy the environment, or the setting is probably a better word, because there's no theme really. There's not a narrative that's being built other than you're trying to live a prosperous life on the plains of the Andes. But I love the design of the game, the feel of the game. I love to play it a lot, and I think you should too, which is why I put it on my list. It's moved up from number 24 to number 9 because I like it a whole lot, and that's Altiplano from Rainer Stockhausen and DLP Games. Next up on my list, number 8. This is this one that's been around for a while. It was not on my list in 2015. I don't think it was published yet. In 2017, it was my 8th favorite game. In 2019, it had slipped one position to 9th. Then in 2022, it's back up to 8th. This is a game very consistent, very beloved. I haven't even played all the expansion stuff yet, but it never misses a trick. It never misses a beat. It's a game I enjoy every time. It's Anachrony from Mind Clash Games. Now, Anachrony was designed by David Turkzy and then heavily added to by Victor Amann or Victor Peter and Richard Amann. It is everything that Mind Clash does well. It is beautiful graphic design, wonderful minis, really neat gameplay. I love the thing I like most about it is the loan mechanism, because it's a loan. When you go to play the game, you can borrow money and you have to pay it back. Or you can borrow stuff and you have to pay it back. But narratively, you're borrowing from yourself in the future. And that one little twist is so delightful. For one, you don't pay interest. So it's not like a game where a Martin Wallace game, you borrow 10 pounds, you have to pay back 15 or something like that. No, in this game, there's no interest. You just have to, sometime in the future, take the action to send that money back to yourself, or that person back to yourself. And what I really like about the game, I really like that mechanism because it feels very thematic, and everything else in the game piles on to that theme. That you have these different kinds of resources that all feel thematic. You have the art for the different colonies, and especially the minis that go with the different colonies are all beautiful and thematic. The buildings that you make, they all have these neat powers that feel thematic, even if they aren't named. And that is the one big miss, I think, in the game, is that they did not name the tiles. There is a list of sort of community generated names for the tiles, and somebody made a printer friendly label set, so you could buy a sheet of printer labels and print them, but then you have to cut them out really small and you have to stick them on, and I'm not sure I want to do that. But I love the narrative that emerges when you buy one of these tiles. So my very favorite, the thing I love the most, is there is a tile that lets you sacrifice a person for water. And water is one of the difficult to get resources that's really important in the game. You need to have water. And the Harmony colony is able to, or the Harmony colony has a thing where they can recruit a worker after the round is over. So when the round starts, there's, a certain number of workers put out available for recruiting. And at the end of the round, if there are any left, depending which Harmony leader you are, you can recruit one of those leaders or one of those workers. So what I really like to do then is get a hold of the building where you can, for a free action, sacrifice a worker to get water, get a bunch of water. And then I set up a thing where the Harmony leader recruits workers just to be grist for the water mill. And boy, that is a dark story, which is, in keeping with the overall narrative of the game itself. It is a dark tale about a dangerous time for humanity, and it's so good. It's so good. It's thinky, it's crunchy, it's competitive, but not outrageously so. You do have to really think about which spaces you're going to take, but it doesn't feel like a knife in your back when someone else takes the space you wanted. There's so much decision room that you can often find another way to get the thing you needed or to do the thing you wanted to do, maybe for slightly fewer points. I also like the number of different ways that you can pursue points. So again, lots of flexibility. A beautiful game, one of my favorites. Glad to play it every time I get the opportunity. That's Anachrony from Mind Clash Games, David Turksey, Victor Peter, Richard Amon. My number 8. Love it. All right, just 2 left. I'm making good time. I might actually finish before I get home. What a shocker that would be. All right, my number 7 game, 4th one to talk about today, is a bit of a cheat. I'll admit it, it's a bit of a cheat because my number 7 game is, like Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, a game you can only play once. But it's a game that they've had 3 different versions of now. So if I can only play it once, but it's 3 different versions, do I count them all? Yes, I do. That's right. Number 7 is Pandemic Legacy. Now, I really like Pandemic. It is a great cooperative game. It's one of those ones where, if I'm with a new player and somebody's like, hey, will you play Pandemic with me? Absolutely, I will. And I'll love doing it. Pandemic's great. Can't wait to play it. But when Pandemic Legacy came out, and what's the thing I love most about it? The reveal. That's what makes legacy games so amazing is you have this game that you already enjoy, and then at the end of the game or during the game, something happens and you get new information. You get a new rule, you get a new element that gets added, and that in itself is already cool. Campaigns are already cool. But then you combine that with the legacy element, and reminder, I am a tyrant about this. Legacy means permanent decisions. Now, admittedly, many legacy games you could work around it. You don't have to really tear up the cards. You don't really have to put the stickers on the cards. Blah, 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 blah. That's not okay. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it, I guess. But when the game is built in a way that says, put a sticker here, tear this up, that is a legacy game. The idea is that you are making a permanent decision. You are permanently altering the state of your game so that when you play it next time, that decision has been made. And no game has better used that functionality than Pandemic Legacy. Pandemic Legacy Season 1 is a magnificent piece of game design. It's a magnificent piece of narrative storytelling. It's got ups, it's got downs, it's got twists, it's got turns. It's got boxes you open and cards you sticker, cards you destroy. It is fantastic. Season 2, not quite as good as Season 1, I would say. Still very good, but they veered from the formula quite a bit, and the result was that the game itself was a little less fun. I think the game of Pandemic Legacy Season 2 was less fun than the standard Pandemic game. It was still good, but a little bit less fun. Now, Season 0, which is the 3rd game, is a prequel to Pandemic Legacy, and it returns to the more traditional Pandemic formula. In doing so, I think it's great. I'm really enjoying the story beats. I'm really enjoying where it's going. Now, we're only about halfway through, which means that Pandemic Legacy is also going to suffer from, probably, the Sherlock Holmes effect, which is how does it do in my ratings over time when there's nothing else to play? Because Leacock and Davio have said Season 0 is the last Pandemic Legacy. They're not making another one. And if that's the case, that means that my ability to play new Pandemic Legacy is going to be reducing. Now, I could always, if I had a group that I wanted to do it with, I could always play a game of Pandemic Legacy, start over, buy a new set, and play it with people who've never played it before. And I would just, abstain from contributing to the plot decisions. I bet I would have a riotous good time doing that still. But it's nothing like the first time when you don't know what the story is. For all of those things, but especially for the narrative reveal and the permanent changes, Pandemic Legacy is an experience you really should pursue if you at all like narrative games or if you at all like cooperative games. There's few experiences that are better. So that's Pandemic Legacy, my number 7 game from Z-Man Productions, designed by Rob Davio and Matt Leacock. I think Matt Leacock might get first credit there, because it is his, Pandemic is his thing, but still, amazing. Which brings me to my last game of the day, my number 6. I wonder how many of these have been really predictable. Regular listeners, I would love to know, how many of these did you see coming? So my number 6 marks the third Mind Clash game to be on the list. And one I'm sort of surprised is here because it was further down. I would have, had you just asked me before I really thought carefully about it, I probably would have put Anachrony above it. But in 2017, it was number 13. In 2019, it was number 32. And this year, it is number 6. This is Trickerion. Now, Trickerion is the first Mind Clash game. It's from Victor Peter and Richard Amon. It got a glorious, beautiful collector's edition reprint, which I backed, along with some expansions that are delicious. And here's why I like Trickerion. If Agricola is like being a watchmaker, Trickerion is like being a watchmaker, but having to work blindfolded. It is so tight. It is so crunchy that you are going to find your brain melting out your ears when you try to figure out what you're going to be doing. It demands a variety of different inputs. It demands careful planning for how you're going to execute things. And then it has absolutely brutal worker placement competition stuff. Because in Agricola, you take a space, and then I take a space, and then you take a space. In Trickerion, I have to decide which of my pawns, which have different abilities and different powers, different amounts of actions they can take, are going to which part of the board before I see which pawns you're putting in which part of the board. And that distinction, that issue, this is the thing I love about Trickerion, is that moment of deciding where you're going to send your people. And then when everyone reveals and you scan the board and you have to figure out what order are you going to send your workers in, because the order that you go to the board, that area of the board, also heavily shapes what you're going to get. The theme is a real treat. It's a lot of fun. The theme of sort of Victorian era magicians. The artwork is good. The graphic design is lovely. The tricks are really neat. The process of setting up your show, the different ways that you score points and money and gems when you're doing that. And then you add on the layer of the Dalgard's Academy or the magical objects, both of which give you other kinds of benefits. And you have this delicious layer cake of complicated decisions and tricky problems that really is difficult to beat. In fact, in my estimation, there are only 5 games that beat it. And do you know when you'll learn about those games? In the next episode. That's right, because that was number 6, Trickerion from Victor Peter and Richard Amon, my number 6 game of all time. And that brings me to the end of the episode. So here, listeners, what do you think are the last 5? If you didn't look ahead, think in your head, what do you think are the last 5? Can you figure it out? Have you played the games that I listed this time? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and share. We've had a number of people join the conversation. Chris Hanji from the Shuffle Buddies podcast has popped in and said hello. Hi, Chris. Gabriel Edge is still posting more things about his list, and we've had a couple other people like some posts as well. So come on over there, get into the conversation, share what things you like and which of these games you've played and which ones you want to play. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to reach out to me directly, you can email me, Brendan@rattleboxgames.com. or you can send me a direct message on BoardGameGeek to the username Wombat929. If you'd like to try any asynchronous games, I'm on Board Game Arena, Boitashu, and Yukata.de. In all three places, I'm Wombat929. Just send me a message there and we'll start up a game. Well, I'm really enjoying sharing my top 50 games with you, and I'm looking forward to taking a walk tomorrow to share my last 5. Thank you for joining me on my walk today. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Good night.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.